All right, we are at episode number 15 here, and we wrapped up a little bit more on the church, and now we're going to jump into Roger's time in the 70s at the Larson Group.
Okay, we sold out, Cal Dutch sold out the Larson Company in 1967, and I moved up to Green Bay in 1970. Like I said before, I didn't know if I was going to fit into the operation or not, and my daughter was in high school. She wanted to finish high school. So I came up to Green Bay in 1970, and my main job, even though nobody told me what I was doing, I was titled Assistant Director of Operations. I wanted to take care of our three plants from Cal Dutch and take care of the people that we had hired, or I'd hired a lot of those, to make sure that they were taken care of. The boss, President Mitchell, called me into his office, either the first 71 or 72, and said, we want you to pack stew veg at Waldo. Well, stew veg was a completely different product than we had been canning. All we had canned was peas and corn, and we had pea and corn equipment. Now he wanted us to can a new product, which was stew veg. It was carrots and potatoes and celery and peas and pickled onions. A good product. It was great for making bouillon and so forth. And he wanted to can it in food service cans, number 10 cans. So we designed the building, got a contractor in Cedar Grove, Wisconsin to build the building. I think we paid $38,000 to build the building, and that precast concrete roof and everything else. It's hard to imagine the difference in prices for these different things. And we got a lot of equipment together from the boneyard and from other plants, and we had to take carrots and would slice the small carrots, and the big carrots we would cube cut. We were trying to make a stew veg that resembled what grandma would make at home, different sized particles. And the potatoes, we tried to get small potatoes, but we couldn't get enough of them. So we had small potatoes that we put in the can whole. The next size, we would cut them like a tangerine. And the big potatoes, we ran through a beet cutter that I got from our beet plant that would cut the potatoes like a grapefruit, and then would have a cross-cut knife, so you had half tangerine pieces. So we had a nice-looking product, and it sold very well. We packed over 250,000 cases. And then the sales department said that would be a good product to have in retail-sized cans. So we had our Cedar Grove plant that was 15 miles away. We said we'll prepare the product at Waldo, put it in hoppers, transfer it to Cedar Grove, and put up a canning line for 1 pound, 12 ounce. It was a 2.5 size can. They call it 2.5. And there was a large can that you see in the store now when you buy a big can of tomatoes. And we canned several 100,000 of that. So here we had been with Larson Company just a couple of years, and we ended up with a new product that worked out real well. We packed 250,000 cases of gallons, and I don't know how many 100,000 cases of the retail by just trucking it from Waldo over to Cedar Grove. So that worked out fine.
And how much experience did you have with stew veg before that?
I didn't have any, except that I call it Larson Company. They were canning it on a small base of just a few thousand cases at the Hortonville plant. And they were running the potatoes and the carrots together, and it wasn't a good operation, but hey, they were just trying to get the product off the ground. So I took our staff, 3 maintenance guys from the Waldo plant over to Hortonville, and I said, the only reason we're going to Hortonville is we're going to show you how we aren't going to do it at Waldo. And pointed out the weaknesses of the system, not faulting anybody at Larson, just that they had to do it quickly and we had a little bit more time on it. So we put in a system that worked out well. We had a new building and everything worked out fine, and it was a great product for Waldo, because heretofore they would can peas and corn. They would have peas for 5 weeks and corn maybe for 5 weeks. And here we started with stew veg when corn was done, and we ran stew veg until it froze up in December. We had a pile of carrots as big as the warehouse. I can still see that big pile of carrots. And it was cold weather. You could storm for a long period of time. So that was our stew veg project. And then shortly thereafter, 1974, I was promoted to director of operations, I think in 1973, but I had gone through the stew veg deal. I got a call from a vice president of Packerland Packing Company. He said, would you like to get into a meat project with Packerland? So I said, well, I'll have lunch with you, we'll talk about it. So I sat down with him, and it looked good to me. As I went to my boss, I said, we have an opportunity. My boss said, well, we'll bring it up to the board. I wasn't elected to the board until 1977, I think, at Larson Company. But I went to the board with our proposal. I said, here's the chance we have to get into a meat operation with Ziggy Frankenthal at Packerland. And several of the board members said, are you going to work with Ziggy Frankenthal? I said, I think I can handle it. I said, okay, it's your baby. So we got into the meat program, and it turned out to be a real good program. We started in 1974, and I retired in 1993, and they were still going strong. And they ran it until in the early 2000s, and then the buyer of the Dean Foods vegetable division, or Larson Company, said they could handle the meat program without having somebody else broker the meat for them. And they lost out on the whole meat business, and they went to a competitor of ours. But it turned out very well for us. And that helped my Vita as far as that goes too, because we had the stew veg that worked out good, and we had the meat program that worked out good. And I was involved up to my eardrums on that stuff. So.
And you mentioned there's a bit of a trick to buying meat, is that right?
Yeah, there is a trick to buying meat. Ziggy Frankenthal died a couple of years after we were in the meat program. And my boss called me. He said, did you hear the news? Ziggy died. He had a heart attack in the driveway. I said, I'll see you tomorrow morning in the office. So we sat down. What are we going to do? I said, well, we'll do it alone. Heretofore, Packerland was buying all the meat, and all we were doing is canning it and shipping it for a fee per pound. I said, we'll try it alone. And I did it the first year alone, and I found out that I wasn't a meat buyer. Meat buying is a very, very difficult job, and you'd think they'll never be friends again after you hear them talking on the telephone. But the son of Ziggy Frankenthal said he would broker the meat for us, and we got him to broker the meat for us, and that made all the difference in the world, because he could talk the language of the meat industry. And as a result, on Monday morning, he would call 10 different meat suppliers from Missouri to South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, and the Midwest, and ask how many pounds they would bid at such and such a price. And we would decide between the meat broker and myself as to how we would group these bids. We could put them all together, have a higher price, or we could segment it and say we'll bid 1 million pounds at this price, and we'll bid 1 million pounds at this, and hopefully you'd get all of them. But if you didn't get all of them, at least you'd get some. And he really made the program successful for us. Now, we had to get plans approved, because the USDA doesn't like to have you pack or handle meat in a vegetable plant. They want it barricaded, and they want it in a separate part of the building. So we had to have plans approved. We had our engineering department draw up plans for the mixers and the clothing machine, the vacuum machine, and so on and so forth. And then we had to go to Washington and have the plans approved. And I went to Washington, and I wanted to get the plans approved, and I found out that the man at USDA was a guide at the Space Museum. And I told him that I really liked the Space Museum. I never had a chance to go there. He said, well, we'll get these plans approved real quick, and we'll give you a chance to spend a couple hours at the museum. I said, well, that would really be appreciated. So I went over to the museum, and I stood there and said, what am I doing here? So I called a cab, went to the airport, and got back to the office. But we got our plans approved.
Mission accomplished. One last topic. We're talking about the 70s. Obviously, financially, it was a very unique time. You'd mentioned an example where you had to do a little bit of cost cutting.
Yes. My boss was a great, I think he was a CPA, a great numbers guy, and he would set goals like any president do on a business. He said, this is what we're going to earn. And we were a publicly traded company, So you like to have information that is reliable and truthful so that when you tell the news people that you're going to hit 20 cents a share or whatever it is, you're going to hit 20 cents a share. And my boss said, we need $100,000 cut out of our expenses. And this was after I was sitting in his office several times before that. I said, we got to take more out of your budget. So we cut down our repair part orders and everything. And he said, still need $100,000. So I didn't know what to do anymore. So I went skiing to, like fishing trip, I went skiing to Manitowoc at that hill, and I came down the hill. I got an idea. I said, I had figured out in my head when I was skiing that if we took a 5% pay cut, we would hit $100,000. It was from February until May 31st. And I thought I'd go into his office and say, we'll all take a pay cut except you. And I thought he would say, well, let's forget about it. And I went in there and gave my pitch, and he said, that's a great idea. And he said, I'll go along with it. So I thought, no, I thought I was going to get out of it. I had to go back in, and it was a difficult deal because to take 5% out of people that aren't earning a lot of money, all hourly people. And I took my physical a couple months later, and the doctor at Prevail Clinic said there's something different about the people that are getting physicals this year. They seem to be stressed out. And I told him the story. He said that's probably what caused it. But we got the $100,000, and I think we had probably as many negatives within our company as we had positives with the marketplace. But that's what you do when you're told to take the money out. But I'll never forget that I thought, except you, he said, that's a great idea. I'll do the same thing, Chuck.